All right, Shalom. First and foremost, call Halal Yamla, Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Harakak Wadash. Double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders, a great millstone from whom I learned the truth from. And also, peace and salutations to the hopefully elect of the nation of Israel, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. And there's going to be another video going into another article. Okay, Prophecy Watch, current event type video, if you will. All right, this is going into another article from the Newsbreak app, and the source of this article that you see here on the screen is from Daily Fly News. And as you see, the title of the article says, "Feds warn Americans of potential, terrorist attacks." Okay. And then it goes into, it says, the U.S. Departments of State and Homeland Security issued warnings to Americans on Sunday in all 50 states and living abroad of heightened security concerns and potential, terrorist attacks after President Donald Trump's targeted strikes against Iranian nuclear sites. All right. Then I'm go down a little bit more into the article. Okay, it says a little bit further down. It says the Department of Homeland Security issued a national, terrorism advisory system bulletin for all U.S. citizens, stating, quote, "The ongoing Iran conflict is causing a heightened threat environment in the United States. Low-level cyber attacks against U.S. networks by pro-Iranian hacktivists are likely, and cyber actors affiliated with the Iranian government may conduct attacks against U.S. networks." All right, and then it says a little bit more, quote, it says, "Iran also has a long-standing commitment to target U.S. government officials it views as responsible for the death of an Iranian military commander killed in January 2020. Okay, the warning states, noting that violent extremists living in the United States may be motivated to commit violence in response to the targeted attacks against Iran. Such attacks would, quote, would likely increase if Iranian leadership issued a religious ruling calling for retaliatory violence against targets in the United States," the warning adds. Okay, and then it says, continues to say, "Recent terrorist attacks in the U.S. were motivated by, anti-Sem or anti-Israel sentiment," the warning notes, "and the ongoing Israel-Iran conflict could contribute to U.S.-based individuals plotting additional attacks." So pretty much as this article was going into, the feds, are basically warning of potential, terrorist attacks, following the strikes that Trump, executed against Iran in response to the back and forth that's been going on as of recently between Israel and Iran. Where, Trump ordered out, I believe it was 3 military strikes against 3, Iranian nuclear facilities in defense of the current state of Israel. And so now, as we see, the feds are now warning, that, pretty much one of the ways that Iran is going to retaliate against the United States is by, by pretty much activating, Iranian sleeper cells throughout the United States to commit, terrorist attacks and, attacks in different cities and whatnot, cyber attacks, and, of course, we, the hopeful elect, as the scripture speaks about, we're not ignorant of the devices of Satan, Okay, over these last few years under the Biden administration, the Biden presidency, we've been seeing the Democrats, the so-called left, all right, allowing all these migrants to enter into the country, flood into the country by the hundreds and thousands, you know, many of them being military age, fighting men from different countries, so-called Chinese men, okay, men from Syria and different parts of the world, Africa, okay, and even Iranian migrants, okay. We the hopeful elect, we already know what that was ultimately all about, okay, to allow these people to flood into the country, okay, as hired sleeper cells, to pretty much do their thing whenever Esau gives them the green light, for Esau to justify shutting everything down, okay, bring forth mass surveillance through AI and pseudoscience and okay and whatnot, all under the guise of peace and safety. All right, you know, and as we see, and as we're reading in this article, now the government, is suspecting, pretty much Iranian sleeper cells to pretty much activate, in retaliation of these recent attacks on Iran by the U.S. military. Okay, and again, this is ultimately all right. Now, me personally, I believe, something big is getting ready to happen. Okay, and I believe that, some type of major event is going to happen in this country, and the government is going to blame it on Iran and this, that, and the third. Okay, and then ultimately, we know it's all going to be orchestrated by Esau Edom on the left hand side to go forward with the NWO agenda. All right, but it's only time will tell. Okay, only time will tell if an actual attack is getting ready to happen. All right, very soon. Whether they're gonna blame it on Iran and this and the third. Okay, but so-called terrorist attacks, happening here in Babylon the Great America. Okay, if if these potential attacks were to actually happen in the near future, okay, well that that will be part of Bible prophecy. Okay, let's get the book of Job, Job 18. All right, Job 18, which speaks of the wicked in this chapter, and we know Esau Edom is the wicked, pursuant to Malachi 1 verse 4. All right. This is Job chapter 18 and verse 11. It says, terrors shall make him afraid on every side, and shall drive him to his feet. His strength shall be hunger bidden, and destruction shall be ready at his side. So as it said in verse 11 again, terror shall make him afraid on every side. All this, all these wars that Esau Edom, especially via America, in the West, the NATO and the EU countries, all these wars at the West, including Israel as well, have waged throughout the earth over these, past few centuries, especially over the past century, okay, the past 100 years and whatnot, all right, all these wars, all these conflicts that Esau has done throughout the earth, especially throughout the so-called Middle East, all right, amongst those Islamic nations, now that when Esau hears talks of some of these Islamic nations retaliating against him, in his own land, in his own countries, okay, in the form of different attacks and whatnot, okay, terrorist attacks, now he's afraid. Now he's shaking in his boots. Okay. Because he feels that he's getting ready to face, a small fraction of judgment, okay, for the, the wickedness and the violence that he's committed throughout certain parts of the earth against certain nations of people on the earth. Okay, terror shall make him afraid on every side. And these Edomites, okay, especially here in America, they know that they're owed, judgment. They know that they're owed some type of retaliation for the wickedness that they, in the wars and violence that they've shed throughout the four corners of the earth. Okay, from the leadership of this place all the way down to the average everyday American Edomite. Okay, they know that they deserve something big to happen against them for the violence and the wickedness and the wars and the bloodshed that they've done throughout the four corners of the earth. Okay, terror shall make him afraid on every side, and shall drive him to his feet. Okay, and now, whether these terrors are going to come from, particular Iranian sleeper cells, as Esau's been talking about over these past couple of days, or not. Ultimately, we the hopeful elect, again, as Scripture speaks about, we're not ignorant of the device of Satan. Okay, we know ultimately that Esau is going to orchestrate some type of the elites of Esau, Edom, that is, his top banking families. We know that these Edomites, these upper level echelon Edomites, are going to orchestrate some type of major black swan event. Okay, to justify shutting things down. Okay, mass surveillance, locking things down, all for the purpose of, establishing order out of the chaos that they've created on the left hand side. And it's ultimately all going to lead to the charagma. Okay, and it's all going to be presented as, peace and safety and whatnot. Okay, because remember, as of course, Iran is an Islamic nation. Anytime, okay, there's some type of attack, that takes place here, here in Babylon the Great, okay, and they blame it on, Islam and whatnot, Esau uses these types of events to justify, unrighteous decrees, such as, for example, look at the whole, September '01 attack. We all know what happened here in Babylon the Great, America, in September 2001. Okay, they blame that attack on the Muslims, Ishmael and whatnot. Okay, and it led to what? George Bush, creating the Patriot Act. Okay, which, if you don't know what that is, all right, so let's look it up. What is the Patriot Act? All right. Let's see. Yep. All right. So this is from Google. Okay. It says Patriot Act. The USA Patriot Act, signed into law. Okay, signed into law by President George W. Bush in 2001, granted the federal government new powers to combat, what they deemed as terrorism. All right, it says the act was introduced less than a week after the September, 1/1 attacks. See that? So George W. Bush, as it went into, he signed that literal act, the Patriot Act, in less than a week after the September 2001 attacks. And it says, and passed with little opposition. Yeah, with little opposition. Little opposition from both the Democrats or the Republicans. Because what? They used that event as a means to justify, passing a law that would basically threaten, everyday Americans' constitutional rights, all for the purpose of what? As it went into, combating what they call, what they deem terrorism, all right, for the purpose of peace and safety, okay. And it says the act's goals include expanding surveillance. See that? Expanding surveillance. All right. Law enforcement can use surveillance against more T-era crimes and conduct investigations without alerting suspects. You see that? So basically conduct investigations without, without issuing, forth warrants, without without giving, their targeted suspect heads up and things like that. And as it went into, those things, pretty much granted the federal government new powers, meaning what? Powers that weren't introduced or exercised before, powers that wasn't set up by the so-called founding fathers and whatnot. Okay, and this is how Esau operates whenever he orchestrates, some type of major event or major attack. You know, which when you go into it, there's all types of information and documentaries and whatnot that proves that whole September '01 attack was all orchestrated. Just look up. How did Building 7 fall? When it wasn't even hit by any planes or anything. But yeah, and as there's a major quote by the elites of Esau Edom, never let a good crisis go to waste. Because these elites of Esau Edom, anytime there's a major crisis taking place throughout the world, whether it be within the West, America, Babylon the Great, or throughout Europe or any part of the world, they use these crises, which a lot of them are orchestrated by the elites of Esau Edom ultimately, but they use these crises to take advantage of them. They use these crises to justify making moves toward their NWO agenda, with little to no opposition or resistance, and they present their moves as progress and peace and safety and prosperity and and all these things. All right, but they really go forward with these moves to gain more control. All right, as well as surveillance. Okay, more deception, more witchcraft. And as it even went into right here towards the bottom of this information, the one of the goals of the Patriot Act, as it went into, it said expanding surveillance. All right, law enforcement can use surveillance against more, what they consider T-era crimes, and conduct investigations without alerting suspects. Okay, so so this is written on paper by the former President George Bush. He used that whole attack to grant the federal government new powers, to combat what they deem as terrorism, and one of the ways that they were going to seek to combat it is through increased surveillance. And here we are in 2025, as again, the feds are warning of potential terrorist attacks by basically Iranian sleeper cells. So what you think they're gonna what you think Esau Edom is gonna do in this time? Okay, fully enforce the Patriot Act that Bush signed off on years ago following the September 11 attacks. All right, to increase more AI, more mass surveillance in a form of what? AI. All right, and then eventually going to seek to surveil people underneath their skin via what? Their charagma. Digital IDs, the charagma. Put all humanity on one digital grid. To track who's who and what's what. All right. These are the type of drastic measures that Esau Edom is going to use to go forward with his NWO agenda. With little to no resistance. As one of the things that Esau Edom uses, to pass, unrighteous decrees and, justify taking away people's rights and freedoms, so called, is pushing fear mongering. okay, pushing fear mongering and orchestrating these attacks to put the average American in fear, to put him in a position to cry out to that government for some type of peace and safety and order, okay. And when the government presents something as a solution to the problems that they create, okay, these so-called solutions involved things that hinders people's constitutional rights and their little rights and freedoms in here and there. And because people are in a state of begging and crying to him so bad, people are going to be on board with it, you see. And it's going to be no different in this time, as people are going to be on board for more surveillance, all right, more AI, more technology, okay, the charagma, all right, more lockdowns, more curfews, all right. It's going to be the Patriot Act 2.0 on steroids. Should these potential attacks actually take place. Which me personally, I believe that they will very soon. Okay, and I believe that is all going to be orchestrated. As the left hand always gets down. But let's go to the Apocrypha. Let's get 2nd Ezra 15. Second Ezra 15, and I'm gonna start at verse 28. It says, "Behold, in horrible vision, in the appearance thereof from the east, where the nations of the dragons of Arabia shall come out with many chariots." These different Islamic nations. Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan. Okay, Saudi Arabia. All right, shall come out with many chariots, meaning what? That due to all the wars and the violence and the pressure from the West, these different Islamic nations are pretty much going to team up against the West and against Israel, and even Turkey, before it's all said and done, is going to be going to link up with these different Islamic nations as well as Turkey itself. Even though Turkey is a part of NATO, Turkey is a primarily Islamic nation, all right, Islamic country, and if you've been paying attention over the past couple of years, ever since the October 2023 attacks over there in Israel took place, small hats have been bombing the people out there in Gaza, the Palestinians and whatnot. Turkey has been looking at Israel and America with a side eye, okay, because they're basically looking at what Israel over these past couple of years have been doing to their Islamic brothers out there in Gaza and Palestine. So Turkey is going to join in with these dragons of Arabia, as it's going into these different Islamic countries in the so-called Middle East before it's all said and done. But it says, 2nd Ezra 15 verse 29, "Where the nations of the dragons of Arabia shall come out with many chariots, and the multitude of them shall be carried as the wind upon earth, that all they which hear them may fear and tremble." Yeah, the West is going to fear and tremble, as these different Islamic nations are eventually going to team up and join up together against the West, along with Russia backing them up pursuant to Ezekiel 38, along with China, North Korea, and these different these other countries around the world that have nuclear capability that's against the West. All right, but then it says, verse 30, "Also the Carmanians raging in wrath." Okay, and of course, who are the Carmanians? The people of Iran. All right, "Also the Carmanians raging in wrath shall go forth as the wild boars of the wood, and with great power shall they come and join battle with them, and shall waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians." Okay, we know the land of the Assyrians in these latter days, according to prophecy, is talking about Babylon the Great, America. Okay, so as we see right here, speaking of the Carmanians, which again is who? Iran, the Iranians raging in wrath. Okay, and eventually, doing something against America. Okay, now, we don't fully know, what it fully means when it says shall waste a portion of the land of the Assyrians. Okay, as the scripture says, we know in part, therefore we prophesy in part. But hey, should these so-called terrorist attacks that the feds are warning about, coming from Iran, actually come to pass very soon down the pipe, well, hey, that could be part of the fulfillment of this very scripture that we're reading right here, 2nd Ezra 15 verse 30, going into the Carmanians, which are the Iranians. You see, and so hey, only time will tell. Only time will tell. What's coming down the pipe as far as these last few prophecies to come to pass. What Iran is going to do in response to Babylon the Great, the United States. Okay, following the recent attacks upon Iran from the United States. Okay, just stay tuned. All right, and as well, as it's going into in this article, the feds are basically warning of Iranian sleeper cells plotting an attack. Okay, terrorist attacks here on American soil. Well, guess what? As we the hopeful elect, as we're not ignorant of the device of Satan, should an actual Iranian attack happen here on American soil in Babylon the Great, well, guess what? We know ultimately, in some way, shape, or form, that Esau Edom is going to use his witchcraft and his propaganda and his mainstream news media to somehow throw the Israelites in the midst of in the midst of this as well. Because if you've been watching lately, you've had camps by the likes of IUIC, linking up with the Nation of Islam. Okay, unifying with the Nation of Islam. All right, and not to mention over the years you've had Vocab Malone. Okay, you've had guys like Vocab Malone. Okay, steadily trying to link the Hebrew Israelite ministry with Islam and and so on and so forth. So hey, so should an Iranian Islamic attack happen on American soil very soon, not only is Esau going to use that to justify lockdowns and curfews and mass surveillance and shutting everything down, but he's also going to use this to also persecute this Israelite ministry as a whole as well. All right, let's go back to 2nd Ezra and let's go to chapter 16. 2nd Ezra 16. And let's start at verse 68. It says, "For behold, the burning wrath of a great multitude is kindled over you." All right, Esau Edom getting ready to come down with great wrath because he knows that he has but a short time left. And it says, "And they shall take away certain of you." All right, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, as Yahushua told us about in Revelation 2 verse 10. All right, "and feed you, being idle, with things offered unto idols." Esau is going to be those of us that are going to be grabbed up and cast into these prisons. Okay, Alcatraz Island, Guantanamo Bay, or these other prisons that Trump is talking about deporting actual legal American citizens to. Okay, through draconian laws, draconian measures. Even some of us Israelites, those of us that's written the story, to be cast into some of these prisons. Okay, Esau's going to be trying to offer us what things offered unto idols, which basically ultimately goes into the charagma, the MOTB. Okay, he's going to be tempting us to take the charagma inside of these prisons. But it says, verse 69, "And they that consent unto them shall be had in derision and in reproach and trodden underfoot." Yeah, the 2/3 of our people that's going to bow the knee and consent to this beast system in his image and take their charagma. Hey, the Lord's going to have them in derision, meaning what? He's going to mock them. Because what? The 2/3 of our people that's going to bow the knee and take the charagma, All right, they're going to receive a grievous sore pursuant to Revelation 16:2. All right, and ultimately they're going to be destroyed. All right, they're going to be destroyed by the missiles pursuant to the everlasting gospel in Revelation 14 from verse 9 on down, where the elect will be prophesying against Babylon the Great and against his beast system, his images, his mark, and telling our people that those of our people that's gonna bow the knee and worship the image of this system, the policies and the laws and whatnot, and as well take the charagma, shall be destroyed with fire and brimstone in the presence of the Lamb and the holy angels. Meaning what? 2/3 of our people that's gonna bow the knee and take the charagma, they're gonna be destroyed by way of the missiles. That's what the fire and the brimstone represents in prophecies. Okay, the thermonuclear missiles, the hypersonic missiles that the Lord is going to put the spirit on these different nations to shoot upon Babylon the Great America in World War III. Okay, so it says, 2 Ezra 16 verse 70, for there shall be in every place and in the next cities a great insurrection upon those that fear the Lord. See that? So, due to Esau, Edom getting ready to come down great wrath, all right, the burning wrath of a great multitude is kindled over you, as it read in verse 68, is ultimately going to lead to, all right, a great insurrection against those that fear the Lord, especially against us Israelites, those of us, that fear Yahweh Shema Shai in sincerity and truth, working out our salvation with fear and trembling, standing upon our feet, and preaching his gospel on the highways and the byways, okay, and pushing his word throughout the four corners of the earth. It's all going to lead to, a great insurrection coming upon us from Esau, Edom, and the left-hand side. And when you look up the word insurrection, it means a violent uprising, you see. And one of the things that Esau, Edom is going to use to bring forth great insurrection and persecution against this Israelite ministry is by orchestrating, all right, terrorist attacks, you see, and blaming it on Islam, as Esau's always been doing, over these years, orchestrating some type of attack or some type of violent event, and they're just blaming it on Muslims, on the religion of Islam. Okay. Well, guess what? To justify, passing unrighteous decrees. Okay. Well, guess what? Esau Edom is going to use that same exact playbook here in 2025, as we see war popping up between, Israel and Iran, and the U.S. getting involved with it. Okay. He's going to orchestrate, some type of terror attack or multiple terror attacks across the United States, and just blame it on Islam again, okay? And in some way, shape, or form, throw the Israelites into the midst of that, okay? To justify coming against us Israelites in this Israelite ministry, you see. And as you read a little bit down further into this chapter, 2 Ezra 16, it's all going to lead to the Lord, okay? Matter of fact, I'll continue reading verse 71. It says, they shall be like madmen, sparing none, but still spoiling and destroying those that fear the Lord. Okay, they shall be like madmen, sparing none. Breaking into our houses in the middle of the night with no warrant, no warning, no, grabbing us out of the house, throwing us into the back of a van or a bus or whatever the case. Okay. And just hauling us off somewhere that we never been to before, okay, and putting us in a stressful situation, prison camp, tempting us with the charagma, testing our faith, you see. And it says, verse 72, for they shall waste and take away their goods and cast them out of their houses. You see that? Cast them out of their houses, grabbing us up, and throwing us into the back of a van or a bus or, whatever vehicle. Okay. And it says, verse 3, it's all going to lead to the Lord doing this. Verse 73, then shall they be known who are my chosen, and they shall be tried as the gold in the fire. So you see that? So all of this that's getting ready to, come down the pipe against us Israelites, all right, from the left hand, from Esau, Edom, coming down great wrath, is all ultimately going to be a trial from the Lord. Because remember, that video that I did about 2-3 weeks ago, remember, the Lord Yahweh Shemashah is in control of all things, So while Esau, Edom, is going to come down great wrath and bring forth, draconian measures and unrighteous decrees, okay, to justify mass surveillance and persecution and martial law and all these things, hey, Yahweh Shemashah is going to be in control this whole time, okay? And Yahweh Shemashah is going to use Esau, Edom coming down great wrath, okay, as an opportunity to make known who are his chosen, to make known who are his elect, to make known, which one of us Israelites, okay, within this whole entire Israelite ministry that really and truly fear Yahweh Shemashah with sincerity and truth, which one of us, have been preaching 100% gospel, the right doctrine, starting with the apostles and elders and bishops of Great Millstone, down to the least of us of the hopeful elect, okay? And, it's going to be a time of great trying, okay? A great trial of our faith, okay? To see if our faith, all right, is going to come out more precious than fine gold, you see? So hey, we're not ignorant of, Esau, Edom's devices. We clearly see, all right, again, as the feds are warning about, potential terrorist attacks by, Iran and, Islam and all this stuff. We clearly know and see where Esau is going to take this. Okay. We're not ignorant of Satan's devices. We know what Esau has planned. We know what he has coming down the pipe. We know that he's getting ready to try to establish his NWO agenda, but he has to orchestrate, certain attacks and certain events to justify, taking away people's rights and justify coming down with this NWO agenda and a charagma and this and the third, okay, with little to no resistance, all right? And, in the midst of that, he's going to be, using these attacks to, combat who he deems as, terrorists, okay, which in these latter days, who is Esau Edom going to be deeming as, terrorists? Pretty much any and everybody within this this system that has an opinion against his agenda, that speaks out against his whole agenda in the NWO system, all right, who's calling him out, okay, for his wickedness and his witchcraft. And you best believe he's especially going to aim his persecution against us Israelites especially, all right? Starting with the apostle Great Millstone, all right, down to the least of us that are of the hopeful elect, that's standing upon our feet in these latter days, preaching this everlasting gospel, speaking directly against his beast system and his image and his mark and his NWO agenda, all right? We're going to be number one on Esau's list of, terrorists, as the greatest threat to Esau's NWO. He's going to make us an offender for a word. He's going to accuse us, all right? Pass laws to justify persecuting us, and ultimately beheading some of us, all right? And, the scripture speaks about that, calls it, all right, frameth mischief by law. Let's get that. Psalms 94. All right, Psalms 94 and verse 20, it says, shall the throne of iniquity have fellowship with thee, which frameth mischief by a law? Yeah. And that's what Esau, that's what Esau is going to be seeking to do with these various laws that he's getting ready to pass. Frame mischief. Okay, what does mischief mean? All right, mischief. Okay, Strong's H 5999. It says, I maul Imal, and it means toil, trouble, labor. Okay. In the Strong's definition, it goes into toil, i.e., wearing effort. Okay, worry, whether of mind or body. See that? Because these unrighteous decrees and draconian measures that Esau Edom is getting ready to justify passing is going to be toilsome both on your mind and your body. Okay, because that's what ultimately what Esau wants. He wants your mind via what? Getting inside of your body via that charagma. You see, and then it goes into grievance. Okay, iniquity, labor, painful, miserable, wearisome. Okay, because he's going to be passing, unrighteous laws and framing mischief, to take away your constitutional rights and your rights of privacy and your, free speech rights and things like that, and even your people's Second Amendment rights, the right to arm themselves and defend themselves against a, tyrannical government, things like that, or authoritarianism. You see, Esau's gonna, frame these particular events to justify coming down with all these things. Okay, and as a matter of fact, going back to that word mischief again, right, Strong's H5999, I'm all, right? Now, what's interesting is when you go to Job, the 20th chapter, right? Job 20 and verse 22, it says, in the fullness of his sufficiency, all right, talking about the wicked Esau Edom, what's going to be the fullness of the sufficiency of Esau Edom, his NWO agenda that he's seeking to establish. It says, in the fullness of his sufficiency, he shall be in straits, meaning what? He's going to be in a difficult position. Something is going to go wrong. Something's going to go left. Okay, as it's going to seek to establish NWO agenda. Okay, and it's going to be this. It says, every hand of the wicked shall come upon him. And as the apostles and elders and bishops of Great Millstone, all right, as they always bring out in this verse, this word wicked in Job 20 verse 22 is Strong's H6001, I'm all. Okay, just like, similar to that word mischief as we read in Psalm 94, right? I'm all. And in this verse, it means laborer, sufferer, wretched one, the workman. Okay, basically the middle class, the working class. You see that? So, to kind of link this in a way to what we read in Psalms 94 and 20, shall the throne of iniquity have fellowship with thee, which frameth mischief. All right, I'm all by law, and and the main people that's going to be catching the most hell and toilsome, Esau, when Esau is going to be framing these unrighteous decrees, taking away people's constitutional rights. The main people that's going to be catching hell when Esau goes forward with this move is the middle class. Okay, especially these red-blooded, middle class American Edomites, that's going to feel their First Amendment rights being taken away, their rights of privacy being taken away, and especially their Second Amendment rights being threatened, okay, by, unrighteous decrees and these, unrighteous laws, okay, is going to be toilsome, troublesome, all right, especially upon the workman, the middle class, the laborers, you see. So I just kind of thought that was interesting right there, as that word mischief in the Hebrew says, basically the same Hebrew word for wicked in Job 20 and 22. All right, I'm all, the laborer, the workman. All right. So, matter of fact, I'll continue reading Psalms 94 verse 21. It says, they gather themselves together against the soul of the righteous and condemn the innocent blood. Yeah, us the hopeful elect. Starting with the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, all right, down to the least of us up the hopeful elect. Because we're not breaking any laws in the society. We're not preaching that, we're going to go out and take the sword and, commit wickedness and terrorism around the country and whatnot. We're just simply prophesying that these things are coming down the pipe, but we're not prophesying that we're going to be doing these things. No. Okay, we speak out against the wickedness of this beast system and its image and its charagma, how this system has pretty much corrupted the earth and destroyed people, took away peace from the earth, destroyed family structures, destroyed food, and so on and so forth. But yet Esau's going to find a way to condemn us and make us seem like, we're the problem in the earth and that we need to be rooted out of the earth in order for progress and peace and safety to prosper in the earth. Okay? They gather themselves together against the soul of the righteous and condemn the innocent blood. Yeah. And they're going to be condemning us, in using, the whole talking point of Islam to justify condemning us, linking us with the religion of Islam. All right. And as well, as our article also hinted at, all right, just to go back to it real quick, let's see. Hold up. Give me a second. Hold up. So I want to point out another point in this article. Yeah, right here. It says, right here. Well, I'll highlight it real quick. Says right here, in the highlighted part that I just highlighted, it says recent terrorist attacks in the United States were motivated by, anti-Sim or anti-Israel sentiment. The warning note. Yeah, like as of recently, you had that it was I believe 2 Israeli diplomats here in the U.S. out there in, I believe, Washington D.C. that got gunned down. Okay, and they claimed that the suspect who allegedly gunned them down screamed "Free Palestine" right before unaliving them, basically. Okay. It says recent terrorist attacks in the United States were motivated by anti-Sim or anti-Israel sentiment. The warning notes, okay, and quote, the ongoing Israel-Iran conflict could contribute to U.S. based individuals plotting additional attacks. So you see that. So not only are they going to use, the religion of Islam to of course, to justify draconian laws, draconian measures, unrighteous decrees, and whatnot. Coming against, whom the government is going to deem as terrorists and enemies of the state and whatnot. But they're also going to use the talking point of the whole anti-Sim talking point as well to further justify persecution and coming against those that are of upright conversation, and those that are speaking the truth, especially against us Israelites. All right. And so, as it said again in Psalms 94, verse 21, they gathered themselves together against the soul of the righteous and condemn the innocent blood. Man, they're going to try to condemn the elect, the blameless. Those of us that said, according to prophecy, that's going to be found without fault, without guile in our mouths, and without deceit. You see that? And it says, verse 22, but the Lord Yahweh Shemashah is my defense. All right. And I believe Psalms 94, I believe this is a song by King David, if I'm not mistaken. All right. But it says, verse 22 again, but the Lord Yahweh Shemashah is my defense, and my power, Yahweh is the rock of my refuge. You see that? So though Esau Edom is going to try to, frame us Israelites and make us an offender for a word and link us with Islam and label us as anti-Sim, this, that, and the third, to condemn us, come against our righteousness. Hey, Yahweh Shemashah is going to be our defense. He's going to lift up a standard for us, and he's going to make known who are his chosen when Esau Edom comes down with great wrath. Okay? And the Lord Yahweh Shemashah is going to be our refuge in that day, our way of escape. Okay? To escape Esau's wrath. And it says, verse 23, and he shall bring upon them their own iniquity, and shall cut them off in their own wickedness. Yea, the Lord Yahweh Shemashah, our power, shall cut them off. Yeah, you see that? So, Esau Edom is, he's getting ready to come with the sword, because he knows he only has a short time left to rule. All right. And he's going to come with all manner of witchcraft and sorcery and deception, AI and deep fakes and all this stuff. But ultimately, this devil is going to lose. Okay. He's the one that's going to be found guilty. All right. And condemned. Okay. While us, the hopeful elect, okay, we're going to be found innocent, blameless, without fault, without guile in our mouths. Okay. And ultimately, Lord will not be of that number, covered by the blood of Mashiach Yahushai. You see? And the Lord's going to cut them off in their own wickedness. All right. The Lord's going to put a, matter of fact, let's see. All right. Let's look up this term, shall cut them off. Okay. It says, Strong's H6789, Tazamah, and it says to put an end to, cut off, destroy, exterminate, extirpate. What does that word mean? Extirpate. Okay, it's from Oxford Dictionary of English. It means eradicate or destroy completely. Okay, to root out, to weed out. All right, to put an end to terminate, to be ended, to be annihilated. All right, yeah. This is what, this is all what Esau Edom's witchcraft and wickedness and iniquity and the violence is all going to lead to. Okay, the Lord cutting him off in his own wickedness. All right, putting an end to his wickedness, putting an end to his madness. All right, and bringing judgment upon him. Okay, while at the same time, all right, rendering his elect, okay, guiltless, blameless, all right, innocent. You see. So so hey, it's like it. I didn't mean to do that. So hey, E is getting ready to come down great wrath via the sword. He's gonna orchestrate all types of wicked left-hand events to justify coming down with the sword and pseudoscience and technology and witchcraft. Okay, and as well to ultimately, condemn the innocent, the blameless, and those of us that are of upright conversation. Okay. And so, hey, it's important more than ever for us the hopeful elect to remain occupied in prophecy, remain vigilant, remain on our watch, be circumspect. Okay, watch and pray. Constantly be tapped into the Holy Spirit of Yahweh Shemal Shah. Because hey, at this point, it's any day now. Any day now. Anything could happen. Okay, so hey, stay vigilant, stay circumspect, stay on your watch, and stay tapped into the Holy Spirit of Yahweh Shemal Shah. Because we're in some very, very interesting times, and as the scripture says in Romans, our salvation is nearer than when we believed. Okay, so I'm gonna pretty much end it off on there. Lord willing, this video is edifying, and until next time, shalom.